when are like the landmark periods where you kind of felt yourself, graduating from this sort of pentatonic type thing into the diatonic sort of world?
Well, I suppose from the age of about, I think I got my first bass and the little amp and that when I was about 14. And I did learn probably then only the basics of, the root and major third and fifth and maybe a seventh run and a sixth run and that sort of thing, and things from records. And early McCartney was, like we said before, was quite simple, so I could, pick up some of his stuff and that. And then graduated through towards the end of the 60s. And I started listening to people like, I think in about 1968, 69, there was one of my favorite groups at the time was the Jeff Beck group, with Rod Stewart singing and Ronnie Wood playing bass. And Ronnie Wood was a very good bass player. Even though before the Jeff Beck group he'd been a guitarist, he became, I think out of necessity, the bass player of that band. And he played some great stuff, He had...
I love that.
He had a bit of a growly sound himself, It was more of a Fender growly sound. I think he used a jazz bass.
Okay.
And that was definitely an influence. And when I started listening to people like, Ronnie Wood playing that style and Jack Bruce, and plus with the past melodic stuff of McCartney, I started to develop more of my own expression or my own style that was influenced by those people, And then I think when I was in a band in about 1970 called Carver's Jute. That's, I don't know if it needs spelling, it's Kahvas, new word, Jute. And that was a very progressive band. And because that band was a band that wanted to do, we wanted to do our own material. We didn't do any covers. We may have done like one or something like that, but 99% of our stuff was all original material. And so when you get into original material and there's no other person to listen to as far as, what shall I do in this song, that was really a great learning period to come up with my own bass lines and start to look at, how the song should sound.
So it was right about that time that you started to really grow into your own thing.
Yeah, I would say about 1970, about that time. From 69, 70, around there, doing more original material and writing my own bass lines and that sort of thing.
The 61 P-Bass, Bob, that you have, it seems to be your main workhorse bass.
Well, that's what I've always called it. That is the one that has been the workhorse in so many different recordings and on so many different tours, and it has been an old favourite.
What is it about the 61 P-Bass, Bob, that makes it so special for you?
Well, probably just the vibes and energies that's gone into it after having used it so much over so many years. But also, I'm not as paranoid about taking that one out on the road because it's a bit of a silly thing, really. But in 1972, when I was in London and I first bought that bass, it was only 11 years old, but somebody had it and used it a lot, and a lot of the finish on it had been worn off.
Right.
And a friend of mine that lived in the apartment below me in London, he worked for Led Zeppelin. His name was Clive Coulson. He used to do the upfront sound and that. And he said, when you get a finish like that, he said, it's quite common now that people take the finish off and just bring it back to wood. He said, I'll help you do it.
Yeah,
so we did that. And there's a story of things I wish I'd never done, because even though it was a bit beaten up, it was totally original.
Yeah.
But we took the finish off and just brought it back to wood and varnished it, and it kind of, when you do that, it kind of devalues it a bit, but I suppose because so many of the other basses that I have are great basses too, but they are totally original and some of them very collectible, and with that one, it's, being the workhorse, I'm not as paranoid about taking it out. on the road. Although I would hate anything to happen to it too because of its history.
Oh, it's like Excalibur, I mean, it's pretty famous. Bob, can we switch gears? And I really want to talk about, really the bigger thing here, which, the composition and especially your lyric work. Because the thing is, and it's a thing that we try to talk about there, a lot of guys play, and a lot of guys can wiggle their fingers great, and so on and so forth. But when we talk about elevating ourselves from a player status to a composer status, it's just a whole nother level of musicianship. At what point, in your life did you, first try your hand at writing lyrics?
When I was in that band Carver's Duke, I think I had one song on the album, and that was a song called Ascend, and it was a bit of a sort of philosophical song, but with a bit tongue-in-cheek. But I've always been one for, I've always tended to lean towards songs with a slightly different angle or meaning to them, rather than "You left me, baby," or "I love you, baby," or "Don't leave me, baby," or that sort of stuff. And there's so much. Not that there's anything wrong with that, in its place.
Right.
Everybody likes to hear a song that's expressing feelings that they've had themselves, whether it's I met a great girl, or that my great girl left me, or I'm going to leave you, or whatever. But I think quite often you listen to music and there's just too much of that, And I tended to lean towards, oh, come on, write about something else.
Yeah. Well,
rather than the relationship angle. So my stuff tended to be more, I wanted it to be a bit different to your average boy-girl thing.
Oh, yeah. One thing I really admire about your lyric work so much is that a lot of it is somewhat amorphous on the surface. You're not quite sure what this song is. Like you're saying, it's not about, boy, girl, running down the road in the car, bottle of whiskey thing,
Yeah.
And I think the thing is, it's a lot of, what they should call it, word painting going on.
Yeah.
And I think...
and I don't like to be too specific sometimes, so it's a little abstract, so you can read into it what you like or what your personal situation may fit. Not always. I mean, some songs are really obvious, like, well, I suppose songs like Suicide Solution, and then it's like...
Right. Well,
Ozzy said he wrote that about Bon Scott, but no, Ozzy, remember? I wrote the lyrics.
Well, there's a lot of...
Ozzy did come up with the very first line. Wine is fine, but whiskey's quicker. And that's all he wrote in it. That was it. And that got the ball rolling for me, and I even named it Suicide Solution.
Right.
Because it was a bit of a play on words, Suicide solution, committing suicide is not a solution to your problem. But secondly, committing suicide with a solution, alcohol, it's a solution, it's a liquid, in other words, so it was a bit of a play on words that way.
Sure, it's very crafty.
But, I wrote it about Ozzy because we got the band just together, and he was very, very upset about being fired from Black Sabbath, and he said it was like going through a divorce, and he was drinking a lot, and I thought, fucking hell, Ozzy, you're going to kill yourself, for no reason, you got your future ahead of you.
And meanwhile, you and Randy and Lee are banging your brains out trying to put all this material together for him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Ozzy was there for some, and a lot of the vocal melodies are Ozzy. Some are Lee Kerslake's, but Ozzy was very good on vocal melodies. I always like to credit people for what they did and not lie about what somebody did or didn't do, like Ozzy has. But
I understand.
I've seen him time and time again in print and in visual filmed interviews, saying, when I wrote this and when I wrote that, and, Ozzy's not a lyricist, and, which was part of the reason that I ended up writing all the lyrics for all the songs, which was really out of necessity, because Randy wasn't a lyricist, Ozzy wasn't a lyricist, Geezer Butler in Black Sabbath had written all the Black Sabbath lyrics.
Sure.
And Lee Kerslake, although he'd written a few songs himself, he wasn't a strong lyricist.